What's up, everyone? Welcome to Back to the Future, the podcast that takes a trip down Philly sports memory lane and asks the question, what if? I'm your host, Jim Montgomery. You can follow me on Twitter at Jimbo_Mont. Also, continue to like and subscribe to either the podcast or the video, whichever way you listen or watch it. Every single like helps with the algorithm when it comes to advertising and sponsors and things like that. So definitely feel free to like, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your family, tell whoever. The more the merrier. Also, let me know what you're thinking. The past couple episodes were on topics that I may have been very close to being an Eagle season ticket holder, so my view on them might be a little clouded. So definitely feel free to leave me a comment and let me know what you think. I've had some people reach out over the past few weeks, and we've had a nice little discussion and debate, so keep that coming. We are heading into basically the next couple weeks are the no man's land of the sporting calendar. We have September is really when a lot of these pennant races in baseball heat up. Again, the Phillies are still battling right now, but I think come September 1st, that's when you're really going to see, and I know Bryce Harper is aiming to come back. So we'll definitely do some playoff stuff as we move into September and hopefully into October with the Phillies. NFL season is coming up soon. We just had our second preseason game of 3. There's definitely no way that they are going to play the starters in the third week. So this third week of preseason is basically guys putting their stuff on film so they can possibly get a job later or land on somebody's practice squad. So I'm also getting ready to leave for Penn State, so for work. Ironically enough, I will have some topics down the road on Penn State. I'm hoping to get some help with them, as not the biggest Penn State fan, so I might be a little bit jaded when it comes to certain things. So definitely want to help get somebody on here to keep me unbiased with that. But that's a whole nother story. So I am, because I'm leaving for Penn State in a couple hours, I wanted to get this out before I went up. And being that it is sort of a slow sports time right now, and two things caught my eye this past week, and I was going to save this topic for later on in the winter, but it just irritated me to no end. This past weekend, the BMW Championship, part of like the FedEx playoffs for the PGA, was in Wilmington, Delaware, which for those of you who don't know or listening to this podcast outside of the Philly area, Wilmington's only about 45 minutes from Philly, depending on time of day and where you are in the city. So obviously there's definitely a lot of people from the Philadelphia area down there watching the tournament, which is great, I've seen PGA Tour live before. It's one of the, if you're a golf fan, it's definitely something I recommend going to see, just because those guys are good. I know the commercials, they say these guys are good, but they really are. I mean, I'm not very good, but even the stuff that I saw them do, it was just incredible. The second thing I saw, there was a fight in the stands at a Pittsburgh Steelers Jacksonville Jaguar game. I think a game was in Jacksonville, actually. And the two events are related because, of course, because people are lazy. And no offense, I guess technically I'm kind of in the media with a podcast, but some media members get a little lazy. So what happened at the BMW Championship, I'm still chuckling about it because it's funny. Somebody had a remote control golf ball that they put on the green, and Rory McIlroy was the one player, and I think it may have been Scotty Scheffler. I forget who it was, but Rory obviously came into the FedEx playoffs as one of the favorites and kind of shit the bed the past 2 tournaments. And again, I'm saying that all things equal, knowing that I'd shoot 300 on that course. But so obviously his nerves were a little shot, and he was annoyed at his game. So this remote control golf ball, he went to pick it up, and of course the guy took the remote, moved the ball, went to pick it up again. He missed it with his club, and finally he got pissed off, picked it up, threw it in the water. no harm, no foul. It's definitely kind of funny. I could see as a golfer where you would get annoyed by that, but and again, it's not proper etiquette. It's not something you should have done. But here comes the media. Oh, you can take the Philly fans out of Philly, but you can't take the Philly out of the fans. Now, I mean, you don't know where this guy was from. Chances are he probably was from the area, but it's just, to me, that's lazy. And then it led into the whole, oh, well, they threw snowballs at Santa Claus. They booed this. They did that. They had a jail. And it annoys me. And maybe it is a chip on my shoulder. Maybe as someone who grew up with all of these teams and being such a huge Philly fan, like, I do have that chip, and I get annoyed by that. But taking a step back and thinking about it logically, it's not. There's some merit to it. I think people just tend to go with the low-hanging fruit and say, oh, just like Philly fans, which leads me to the Steelers-Jaguar fight. Of course, people on Twitter, more than a few people, are like, oh, it's like we're in Philly. Oh, it's like just like being at the Lincoln Financial Field, just like being at an Eagles. And it's like, as somebody who goes to Eagles games, yes, there are fights in the stands. I've seen it. I've been near them. Unfortunately, most of those fights are Eagles on Eagles fans. So, like, the Eagle on Eagle crime. I mean, and this was a Jaguar fan and a Steelers fan, which, I mean, it's preseason. It's still a fight. But, like, come on. It's annoying. It's lazy. And so that's the topic I want to talk about today. I wanted to wait until it was even a more slow time, but I think because those two things came up, and those are the types of comments that come up and just irritate the hell out of me so much, because there's so much more to Philly fans than that. And I think it's just these media outlets have their stock footage of I see the same guy from the 1980 NFC Championship game when he's like, Dallas, we hate you. Like, yeah, it's funny, but like, that's the poster child, or the mom or the teacher, I forget what she was, that basically said F you, or you effing suck, ref, or something like that. Like, those are the things. Like, and yes, those things happened in Philly. Don't get me wrong. However, that's not the only place it happens. So it's just. And again, I know I might have sort of a bias here at being a Philly fan, and I have that chip, but I just think it's lazy journalism to do that. So the reason I wanted to cover that is because the one go-to that everybody does is, oh, they booed Santa Claus. They threw snowballs at Santa Claus. And I'm not sure if anybody's ever heard the real story of what happened. And this, again, I'm just... As I'm saying that, I'm like, oh, God, here we go. I'm going to be that guy. And I'm not making excuses. I just wanted to make sure everybody knew the full breadth of the story. So that day that happened, it was a late December game, last game of the season at the old Franklin Field in the late 60s. I think it was like 1968. In fact, I know it was 1968 because anyway. So the Eagles, it was Ray Didinger, who is probably the most well-respected and accurate Eagles historian there is, called, I think I read somewhere, he called this team like the worst Eagles team ever. And that's saying a lot, because I've seen some pretty bad teams, but this team was horrible. So they started the year off, back then they played 14 games, so they started the year off 0-11. And of course, because the way the NFL draft works, if they would have finished with the worst record in the league, they would have had the top pick. Just so happened that year, the top pick of the draft was O.J. Simpson, who, before all of the crazy murder allegations and things like that, was a pretty good and a college running back. He won the Heisman and would have been a great fit to any team. And being that the Eagles were so bad back then, just having anybody good would have been great. So obviously the fans are there, and again, they're going to the game. The team's terrible, worst team ever, but they're still going to the game. And I guess they had it set up because it was a week before Christmas that Santa was going to come around and be pulled by a sleigh of horses, I guess, or something, wave to the crowd. Everybody cheers. Yay, it's Santa. Team sucks, but yay. Well, the night before was a huge snowstorm, and the Santa they hired or wanted to do it for whatever reason couldn't come. So here they are trying to do this halftime show of whatever, like a Christmas pageant or whatever you would want to call it. Didn't know what it was, so they picked out this young kid who was maybe, I think, 18. I think his name was Frank Olivi or Oliver. If I'm pronouncing the name wrong, or I don't want to be disrespectful, because the guy apparently, like, I've read articles that he's done, like, he's a really nice guy and loves talking about the situation. But so he was dressed in a Santa suit for the last game of the season, going to, like, it was before Christmas, and been there, done stuff like that in my 20 some years as a season ticket holder. But apparently he just looked terrible. It just was a terrible looking Santa, which, again, been there, done that. I totally get it. So couple that with the fact that was the game, I think, too, that one of the news stations hired a biplane to carry one of the signs like you see down at the shore, that basically said "fire the coach," and like was flying it around the stadium during the game. So you have that. You have the fact that last game of the season, the Eagles started off 0-11. Of course, they're like a lock to get O.J. Simpson in the first pick. They decided to win the next two games, and that's a typical like Eagle Philly sports team move. All of a sudden now they're in. I think at that point they had already lost out the chance of the first pick. I'll get into that much later, because I do have a whole episode on just that whole season and what happened with O.J. Simpson and how the Eagles basically blew getting one of the best running backs in the history of the NFL, because they went on a 2-game winning streak. And then they ended up winning this game, by the way, the last game. So they won their last 3 games of the season. So they pull Frank out of the stands and said, "You're going to be Santa." It's muddy. I mean, it's just a mess. I mean, picture what happens after it snows, and it's just an absolute mess. So the fans who are already pissed off about the coach, they're pissed off that they lost the chance for O.J. Simpson. They're pissed off because the team absolutely sucked. Like Ray Dininger said, the worst team ever in the history of Philly. So what, in true Philly fashion, which I will say we do boo, but we're not the only town that boos. We boo our players, but we're not the only ones. So let me just do that. So yes, Eagles fans did boo Santa Claus. They did throw a snowball at them because there was still snow in the stands. But I will say, to justify it somewhat, the kid, Frank, who played Santa, said, "I probably would have done the same thing to me if you just saw how I looked." Or I'm paraphrasing there, something along those lines. So that's the story. But that's in 1968. This is 2022. And that's still what we go to. And don't get me wrong, there are plenty of other incidents that happened over the course of time since then in Philly. Not justifying them, but things that shouldn't have happened, that maybe you could go to that. And I'll get more into some of them in a little bit, but we're not the only town that has stuff like that. I mean, Jacksonville is arguably one of the, I don't want to say worse, because I don't want to be disrespectful to another fan base, but when it comes to like passionate fans and people really getting behind those teams, Jacksonville is not one of the top that you think of in the NFL. You think Eagles, you think Raiders, Giants, Cowboys, Packers, you think Patriots, you think those teams, not Jacksonville. Kansas City, not Jacksonville. So the fact that this fight not only happened in Jacksonville, but it also happened at a preseason game. I mean, again, it's lazy. Like, why not just put the blame on the people in Jacksonville? So anyway, I would argue, though, that the angst that those Philly fans, Eagles fans, felt that day didn't start just because the team was so bad that day. I think you had to go 4 years earlier, and I believe this was the start of many of the the downward spiral, the bad luck, if you want to call it that, the just poor whatever. Basically, if it wasn't for this day in 1964, I'm going to talk about, probably wouldn't even have a podcast be talking to you right now. So that was when the Phillies were basically running away with the National League pennant. And back then, if you won the National League or the American League, you automatically went to the World Series. So going into September, the Phillies had a pretty big lead. And, I mean, things started to kind of fall apart here or there. But with 12 games left to play, they had a 6.5 game lead. So think about that. The 6.5 game lead, all they had to do basically was win one of those games that they had early on, and they would have clinched. But in typical Philly fashion, they lost 10 straight. And like I said, I want to do an episode on that later, because I do feel as though that was that turning point for Philadelphia as a city and as a fan base. But so that happened 4 years before. And then you have the team getting ready to get O.J. Simpson, and bam, there you go. So back then, those are two big things. And you didn't have the social media and things like you have today. So people lived and died with those teams. So that's a lot to handle in a 4 year period. So today I want to talk about, what if the bad rep that Philly fans have isn't really their fault? What if it's not as bad? And what if we're just paying for the sins of our grandparents? What if we're paying for the sins of our grandparents who threw snowballs at Santa Claus that day, or were pissed off when Chico Ruiz stole home in 1964 and the Phillies didn't win? I mean, they were printing out tickets. It was supposed to be the Yankees and the Phillies that year. And what if the rap isn't too bad? Now, again, I'm going to give you some examples here of things that happened. There was the time when the Phillies fans threw batteries at J.D. Drew. There was a time when the Flyers fans were heckling Ty Domi, which was dumb, in the penalty box. But somehow, I think the guy either fell over or the glass broke, and Ty Domi beat the shit out of him, rightfully so. There was, when I think it was the 49ers game on Monday Night Football, somebody shot off a flare gun. And again, a lot of these things, the batteries is a little insane, like over the top. But I think what happened with Ty Domi, they were taunting him, which people do. Like, I don't think you have a problem with that. But he was behind the glass, and somehow the glass broke, and there may or may not have been somebody throwing something. But again, the next two, I mean, when I look this up, I have to say, there's the incident when I think it was last year in the playoffs, where some idiot dumped popcorn on Russell Westbrook when he was leaving the court because he was injured. And again, I can't justify that because it's just dumb. There is the other incident with Russell Westbrook where I forget the guy, but he's the season ticket holder, and he was flipping him off, and it's just a funny visual. But what I'm laughing at is because as I was doing some research on some of this, Russell Westbrook seems to be involved in a lot of poor fan behavior, not just in Philly, just around the league. So I mean, once or twice, okay. But when there's like a whole laundry list of things that, excuse me, that Russell Westbrook is involved in, I kind of question that maybe you're maybe a magnet for that. Maybe you attract. And again, I don't want to come off as I'm like, oh, the players, like, you fans can do whatever they want. But when you come up multiple times on that list, I kind of have to question what's going on there. I mean, I do know that there was a jail in the vet. That was the whole thing there for a while too. And I will chalk a lot of that up to, and again, I'm not justifying it. I'm not saying it's right, but to give you a glimpse inside the mindset, I mean, the teams were terrible back in the vet when they put that jail in. So I just don't know if it's fair to just say it's Eagles fans, because then there's the whole generic, can't wear an opposing team's jersey to an Eagles game because you're going to get the crap beat out of you. Let me tell you, I have 2 seats behind me and have since we got into the link that are for opposing fans. I used to sit next to opposing fans at the vet, the whole crazy vet. And yes, you talk trash. That's what you do at sporting events, especially if you're going to throw a little bit of alcohol. But the way that the NFL is set up, the way that our sports are set up, people talk trash. And it's different today than it was when I was a kid, because with like all of the cable channels and all the ability and ways to watch games from all over, it's not as neighborhood based or geographically based as it used to be. Like, I grew up in a time where you're an Eagles fan because you grew up in the Philadelphia area. You live closer to Philly than you do Pittsburgh. That's why I'm an Eagles fan, even though we actually live close enough that we were able to get some of the Pittsburgh feeds. But wasn't enough to transfer me into, because geographically we're not going out to Three Rivers Stadium for a game. We're going down to the vet. But I make it a point, and like, it's all in good fun. It's fun. You call somebody an asshole. You do a cheer, whatever it is. And then at the end of the day, I always shake their hand and say, thank you for coming. And most of the time, they're people from wherever that team is from. So if it's Minnesota, they're from Minnesota. And I don't know why, for whatever reason, where our seats are, that happens. But hey, and I mean, I actually met, and I have a newfound respect for Dallas fans. And not Dallas fans that grew up in this area. I have a couple friends who are like that. I don't have respect for them. No, like, you are a bandwagon fan who couldn't just deal with losing. You wanted to catch on to a winner. Most of the times, these guys are also they grew up in the late 80s, early 90s. So their teams are the Cowboys, the Yankees, the Chicago Bulls, guys like that. And I won't mention any names, but those of you who are close to me, we have one friend that you know who I'm talking about, Corey. But I always make sure to shake their hand. But these Dallas fans from Dallas actually couldn't have been more nicer. The guy told me, he's like, I hate Dallas fans that aren't from Dallas. So there you go with that. So I think the whole narrative is poor. And just to give you the other side of the coin, those are like silly things. I mean, I always picture like, yeah, you shouldn't be throwing popcorn on Russell Westbrook, but at the end of the day, it's popcorn. Yes, he's pissed off. Yes, it's annoying. Yes, today you got to be careful with those things. But it's not like at a Raiders 49ers preseason game when guys are getting stabbed in the parking lot. It's not like a Dodgers Giants game where people are getting killed in the parking lot. It's not like in Vancouver when they lost the Stanley Cup and they burnt down the whole city. Like, that doesn't happen. What about all the racist chants and things that happen in Boston? Nobody says boo about that, but we booed Santa Claus. God, a couple years ago, the White Sox guy fan attacked him and his son attacked the first base coach. And people say in Philly, oh, they teach their kids young to boo. Their first words are always boo. Yet this asshole is jumping out of the stands with his son to fight the first base coach. Not even a player, the first base coach. So let's take a step back and is booing Santa Claus back in 1968. Is that really the narrative we want to do? Especially at a fight for a Steelers Jaguars game, or somebody with a remote controlled ball, which I still think is funny. I'm sorry. It's absolutely hilarious. I need to get one of them for the next time I go golfing. Anybody who golfs with me, I'm not going to tell you when I'm getting it, but we're totally going to do that. But like, to me, the narrative, it's just lazy. It's lazy journalism. And like, I can't think of any time when things happened at the stadium where somebody died. There are some cases outside, away from the stadium, in the city. And I mean, that's a whole another topic for another day, because the violence and crime in Philly is a whole different animal I don't want to get into. But I'm talking like at the game, people are getting stabbed, people are getting killed, people are spewing racist things, people are fighting coaches. That's not happening in Philly. we're booing. We're flipping Russell Westbrook off like this. Where the glass is breaking and guys are getting beat up by Ty Domi. It's not like the Malice at the Palace that when that all happened, when guys were going in the stands. Like, it just blows my mind that it still goes back to something that happened in 1968. And I don't know. Are we paying for the crimes and the sins of our grandfathers? So I don't know. And I think today, with social media, it's a little bit different because then people are on Twitter and they feel like they have the power or the right to threaten these players and things like that. So when a Russell Westbrook gets something dumped on his head, he's going to be a little bit escalated because somebody else had threatened him earlier in the week on Twitter. And by the way, the worst incident for Russell Westbrook happened again in Boston, but everybody talks about it in Philly. And I'm not knocking the city of Boston. I'm just saying a lot of crazy shit happens there. I guess when you start winning and you have a few Super Bowls under your belt, people tend to forget things. But I mean, and then it's like, oh, well, Philly fans, they run their players out of town. They are mean to their players. And guess what? We don't have a checkbook. We aren't at the negotiating table. So to give us that kind of power is absolutely ridiculous. Think about the guys that had, quote unquote, bad relationships with the Philadelphia teams. I mean, Scott Rowland is the first one that comes to mind. And he hated Philly. He was like a Midwest guy. He hated the fact that the media was on him. He hated that the fans had expectations. And he flat out said, I don't want to play there. They offered him what I thought was a fair contract, and it would have allowed them some flexibility moving into the new stadium to sign people. But he flat out said, F you, I don't want to play there. So, of course, Philly fans are going to boo. They're going to see right through that. But that means we ran him out of town? Stop it. Stop it. Mike Schmidt had his incidents with the fans, and something that he's very open about that he struggled with. But I think what happened is it was perceived as he didn't hustle or perceived as he didn't do that. And I think that story came to a happy ending because he's beloved. And luckily, I grew up at the end of his time in Philly, so I was able to really experience and he's my hero. I'm looking at the autographed picture I have of him now. First favorite baseball player. So excited to see him. So I think that one has a happy ending. But again, he was another Midwest guy, and I think those Midwest guys, the same thing happens to them when they go to New York. It's easier to get lost in New York because Philly, even though we're the sixth largest city, metropolitan area in the country, it's still a very small town feel. So you're going to see these players out when you go to the grocery store. You're going to see them when you go out to dinner. They're going to be at your kids' schools in some cases. So there's going to be some interaction, and I think they're not necessarily ready for that. Where if you go to New York, it's very easy to just be lost in the shuffle because there's so many people. Donovan McNabb, and I said I wasn't going to do it, but this is now the third time on this podcast. I'm going to kind of go after Donovan a little bit. Donovan has a love-hate relationship in Philly with the fans, and part of that is he just never got over it. Once again, he's from Chicago. Now, Chicago's a major city, but again, goes back to the Midwest thing. He never got over the fact that he was booed by Angelo Cataldi and the Dirty 30, which, by the way, I hate Angelo Cataldi. I hate that whole thing. That was just stupid because they wanted Ricky Williams. But McNabb never got over that. So you want to put the blame people on why McNabb has a bad relationship? People love him, Angelo Cataldi. I can't stand him. It's all his fault. That's why people don't like McNabb. So take that. But again, those are the things that he never got over. Again, how many times when you watch the NFL draft do you see Jets fans booing their picks or Giants fans booing those picks? And then look at, I can't think of his real name now, Daniel Jones, the quarterback for the Giants. They rip him and make fun of him. They've made fun and ripped Eli Manning for years. Yet Eli Manning, again, it's a different pedigree, but still, he was able to overcome that. So don't give me like, oh, Philly runs their people out. Ryan Howard kind of is in a similar situation, I would say, than Mike Schmidt, where he wasn't fully beloved, and I'm not sure why, to be honest with you. He broke on the scene. He had to sit behind Jim Tomei for all those years. Like, he missed a good 2 to 3 years of his prime. But, I mean, the man came up, and all he did, like, when he was hot during that 2007, 2008, 2009, those 3 years specifically for the Phillies, that man was unbelievable. But I think he's one of those ones then, too, that afterwards, like Mike Schmidt, made up with the fans, and it was more of that love-hate. And, like, I don't understand why we can't do that with Donovan, and I think part of that is Donovan's unwillingness. And, again, I don't want to rip him, because number 5 will always love me, and I will always love him. But that's, again, we'll talk about that some other time. And then Ben Simmons, I mean, I don't know. Did we run Ben Simmons out? I can show you plenty of highlights where people are like cheering him on, doing this, doing that. And I don't want to spend much more time on him, because I've made it clear before. I think he's a scumbag who milked the system. And once none of his other little tactics work, he pulled the mental illness card, which is an absolute, like, just a bitch move. Like, you don't do that. Like, there are people with legitimate mental health issues, and had you come out right away and said that, and I know I'm going to probably catch some slack for this, because people are going to say, oh, well, maybe he was scared too. No, we bent over backwards to help that man out. So I don't want to hear it. But again, those are the things that athletes do, that quote unquote we run people out of town for, which is absolutely ridiculous. And I don't know. I mean, look at the list of players then who are beloved in Philly that can do no wrong. Got Dawkins. I mean, Dawkins wasn't always perfect in Philly, but he manned up and owned it and embraced it. And like he was able to kind of overcome that. Utley, West Coast guy, did the same thing. He kind of kept to himself, but he just did his job and did what he was supposed to. Jimmy Rollins. I mean, it didn't start off well with Jimmy, but I mean, Jimmy Rollins is beloved, and in my opinion, he's a Hall of Famer, and he's loved in this city. And I think he just kept it real, and he called out Philly fans. He would call Philly fans out all the time. And then when he needed to be called out, he accepted it when Philly fans called him out. So again, those are the things. Like, you take it and you become better. And Embiid is the perfect example of that. He got ripped just as much, if not worse, than Ben Simmons there for a while. You know what he did? He said, I took it to heart. I got better. He put in the work. So, like, got Jason Kelsey. I think there's a real connection there. Like, he gets it. But to say that we run people out of town, I just don't know. And like I said, I think we get a bad rep. I think the what if for this is, what if we're still paying for the sins, which I think we are. Like, it's very lazy to keep going back to, oh, they booed Santa Claus. So what? It happened in 1968. Like, my mom was 8 years old in 1968. Like, it's crazy to go back and make that. And I told you, like, I would have been pissed off too. You would have been pissed off. But, like, get over it. Like, it was a snowball. They booed Santa Claus. And yes, there's some other times, the Michael Irvin thing. And even Michael Irvin, who was the guy who got cheered when he hurt his neck at the vet, said, you know what? And again, he got it. He said, the way I destroyed them, I took that as a level of respect that they booed me. I would have booed me too if I did to them what I did to them. So, like, those are the things. I just... It frustrates me. And yes, I do have a chip on my shoulder. And again, this is more of a vent session than a what if. And sometimes we're going to have this, but to tie it in with the theme, like I said, what if we're just paying for the sins of our grandfathers? And all because our grandfathers were pissed off that the Eagles did not have a chance to get O.J. Simpson on the worst team. So they're the worst team ever in the history of the Eagles, and they're not even going to get the first pick because they won. So thank you for listening to me vent. I don't know. I just tell me what you think about this, because I know everybody has an opinion on this. So drop some comments in there, and I definitely want to see it on both sides. But like I said, are Philly fans the worst because we booed Santa Claus when you got fans killing this and doing that? I don't think so. I think it's easy. But again, check out and like and subscribe. Make sure you leave a comment. The more you like, the more you subscribe, the better off it is for me. Let me know what your side of the whole Philly fan is. Maybe I'm just being completely irrational because I am a Philly fan who may have partaken in some of the booing of some of these players too. Who knows? Let me know what you think. Follow me on Twitter at Jimbo_Mott. Until next time, I'll see you when I see you.